Okay, wonderful. What a difficult task to follow on stage after Yossi Vadi. I mean, seriously, what big footsteps to follow. It was highly entertaining. And just keep in the Yossi mode, because we want to give you further advice. I know there are a lot of founders out here who are waiting for advice on do's and don'ts and how to pitch and what investors are looking for. And we're very excited. We have 3 renowned institutional and corporate investors who will share some insights, some secrets, and their view on the European VC scene at the moment. As Florian said, my name is Jennifer. I work for a firm that has been mentioned a couple of times today, for Xing, which is, for those who are not from Germany, we're the largest professional network. We have 13 million members, and I head the editorial department, meaning all the journalistic content on Xing. So, I would like to ask on stage our 3 speakers so I can introduce them. Stefan Wendt, Markus Englert, and Christoph Braun. Please join me on stage. And these 3 gentlemen, they have not only the social capital that we were talking about just now, but also the financial capital. And for our first speaker, which is Markus Englert, he says, you know, the definition of a good year is very simple. It's when the number of successful projects significantly outnumbers the less successful. And in that regard, 2017 was a good year. Although you needn't have worried, he has held top management positions. He was the chief new media officer at the private TV station ProSiebenSat.1, and today he is a managing partner at Texas Atlantic Capital, and they are one of the very few transatlantic venture firms with equal presence in the US, Europe, and Israel. Please give a big warm welcome to Markus Englert. Christoph Braun, our next speaker, he has shared a passion for startups and the internet ever since he did his MBA in the US at the end of the 1990s. And he was in charge of all digital ventures at Burda Media and helped develop it into one of the clear digital leaders in the German media industry. He founded Acton Capital in 2008, even though it was a couple of weeks before Lehman Brothers went bankrupt and took the entire financial world with us. It is a huge success, and in some, the partners have so far invested more than 350 million euros in more than 65 internet-based companies, and he's always looking for people who have a lot of passion and never lose their sense of humor. Christoph Braun. And before I introduce Stefan Wendt, could we possibly have some waters for the 2 other speakers? Do you have water? Because it's incredibly warm up here. Stefan Wendt, you were investing in digital businesses long before the majority of the media industry heard the wake-up call. You are in charge of the digital brands in Germany at Burda Media, which include Xing, as I mentioned, and other well-known brands such as Holiday Check, Yameda, and Cyberport. And you are interested in later stage investments, which means firms that have the potential for valuation of 50 million euros and are profitable like a year or 2 after acquisition. Welcome, Stefan.
Yeah.
So I mentioned before, there are a lot of people who are very interested in you and your advice, also your money, it's an open secret. But before we get into that, I would just like to get an overview of your market sentiment at the moment. The Dow Jones Venture Capital Report was published a couple of days ago, and at least if you judge by the money that investors are putting into venture capital firms, the market is looking very healthy. 2.3 billion euros invested just in the 4th quarter. That's a plus of 45% to the 3rd quarter. So maybe if we start the round by Markus, could you tell me, what's your market sentiment? Is there a lot of money? Is there too much money? And which industries are you most excited about, even if you don't specifically invest in them?
Well, I think there's a lot of money in the market, and there's a lot of ideas in the market, actually. So when I look back, the 7 years I'm now active in venture capital, I'd say it's probably the last 2 years, it's been steadily increasing. I'm not saying that this necessarily means that the quality of ideas has been steadily increasing. I think it's just more ideas. And with more ideas, obviously, there come a lot of good ideas, there also come a lot of bad ideas. So yes, it is a good time for investing on the one hand. On the other hand, since there's so much money, prices really still seem to go up. And there is certain areas and geographies where I'd say it's getting crowded and it's getting pretty expensive, and it's I think more and more important to really find out what is good, what is bad, and we're going to talk about the criteria, I think, later on. What are we looking for? What do we see? I think for us, and I guess that's probably also sentiment that a lot of other people see, e-commerce to me is slightly down. We're less interested in e-commerce. We just see that it's hard to scale. It needs a lot of marketing money. It's a lot of competition. So we hardly do any e-commerce anymore. Social, we hardly do any social anymore. We're looking a lot into finance, insurance kind of topics. We're looking a lot into artificial intelligence, which starts at bots but doesn't end with bots. We would like to do a bit more in health, but to be very honest, we are 3 partners. None of us is a specialist in health, and we can come back later whether you need to be a specialist in order to be a good investor. But health is something I really spend quite a time on. And then also a topic probably for later, everything based on blockchain, smart contract technology is something we start to look at and we're getting more and more interested in. There's obviously not all, I think, but that should be enough for the first sentiment, I hope.
Christoph?
I think the venture business by nature is very cyclical because obviously it moves in cycles. I think if you look at public markets, we're at the end of probably the longest bull run the markets have seen, and that usually also transport itself to the private market, which has to do with private equity and venture capital. Having said that, I think we have certainly no shortage of money. If you look at it at a global scale, if you look at it regionally, I think there's always a lot of concern if we have not enough money in Europe and there's too much money in the US. I doubt that as well. I think there is enough money. I think right now there is the shortage not on the money side, but on the idea side. So I think we're more company constrained than we are capital constrained.
I think, as Christoph said, the investors at the moment are getting a bit more careful because we have now more or less a 10 years great run on tech on the stock exchanges. And if I talk to leading investors, and we have 2 listed companies and a couple of companies who we're looking very intensively into the stock market, everyone expects a correction. And that correction, as Christoph said, will affect, if it's the longer it runs, the steeper the decline will be and the longer it will take. And if you look at the returns of investments in venture, timing is crucial for your success. I think that's what you said, it's very crucial. So having said that, there's a lot of positive movement at the moment. We have many industries who just are thinking about digitalization, who are investing into startups. The German Mittelstand, for example, the Mittelstand in North America, they are looking heavily how they now can transfer their businesses into digital markets. Media was affected very early. There are many industries, for example, like farming. Digital today is 1% of the whole value chain, where we have in media now 29% of all digital is now, all media is now in digital. So there are lots of industries, especially in the B2B field, who haven't been transformed in digital yet, and there are great opportunities overall. But I think we are heading forward to some more we will have more volatility in our markets.
In the markets, okay.
Definitely.
So, Christoph, can the 2 gentlemen, can they be heard in the back if they don't use microphones, or should we ask for some microphones? Can you hear them? Yeah, okay. So, Christoph, you just said that you're more constrained by good ideas, and you said as well there's a lot more, a lot of people going out, let's found something, and I have this idea, and they think that that's founding, and we're going to have Jean-Paul is going to talk about that entrepreneurship is not a lifestyle, it's actually business. So maybe you can tell us what does someone have to provide you with so that you're hooked? What are the ideas that get you excited at the moment? Maybe start with you, Christoph.
I think for us, we are a venture capital firm that looks for companies that are a little bit further down the road, so we're not early stage and seed. I think we're probably looking for three main things. The first one is and that probably holds true for the whole spectrum. It needs to be an idea that really solves a problem of consumers or businesses, doesn't matter, but it needs to solve a real problem. So if it's just something that's nice to have, for some of us, I think that's never going to make a great product. That's probably an app. That's probably something to become self-sufficient in a party of three, but it's certainly not a venture case. So it needs to be an idea solving a problem which is big enough and sustainable. The second one is we're looking for people who have, and I think Yossi is just put it perfectly. I think it needs to be a certain risk profile to the team and to the idea. So I think going overboard and kind of risking the house every single day is probably not a good idea. So kind of dialing up the risk dial too much to the right. And on the other side, you need to risk something, because otherwise you should go work for some of the multinationals that have been around for 100 years. And I think the third one is that there needs to be passion and passionate leaders, because if you're not passionate, you're not going to attract passionate people that will follow you and will want to be on your team, and actually want to be on your team through thick and thin. Because the obvious thing is, Yossi again, obviously a great inspiring person, said that you probably need to pivot. If the number is 3 or 5, I think I'm not sure if he really let out that number, but you need to have people who stick with you through thick and thin. So that's, I think, when we look at the companies, is any of those three things totally absent, I think we still would shy away from it.
Markus, you said as well, after 7 years, one of the things you've learned is if the idea is good, great, but if the team is not good, then you'll most likely walk away from that. What has been, in your experience, can you tell us some anecdotes, something where you really saw that happen?
Yeah, could you hear me without microphone? Is that okay?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's always hard to quote names here and companies here, because that's to the detriment of the founders. So when I look back at what was the biggest mistakes I did as an investor when we started out in 2010, 2011, was really focusing too much on product and idea and not focusing enough on team. And I'm saying team, and I'm very much with Christoph. I think the team has to show different dimensions and disciplines, and it's not one person, because you cannot have all disciplines in one person. So we never invest in one person, we always invest in teams. And when I look back, 10, 11, 12, where we had a couple of investments where I loved the idea, and I talked to my partner, and we always decide together, and we both said, well, the team is okay, we're not really convinced, but the idea is so wonderful. Statistically, those were the bad investments in our case. So we did a video investment in Berlin, a wonderful idea, beautiful KPIs, growing like hell, but the team killed it for whatever reason, right? The wrong team, wrong leadership, good people left, bad people came in. So my key learning is really focus more on team. Well, product has to be there, it's a given, right? And everything which Christoph said I can just follow. It has to have the chance to become big, it has to fulfill a certain demand in the market. But the team, this is to us much, much more important. We generally, statistically, new teams, i.e. people from university, we are much more reluctant to really invest. We'd rather see teams which have some sort of learning curve. Doesn't have to be necessarily startup learning curve, but learning curve in any discipline, because academia helps you, but it's not enough. You have to be there, you should have been in the trenches at least for a while. That's important. And we need the different dimensions, right? Because what we often see, and sorry it's a long answer to your question, what we often see, good product development, product almost ready, and we're slightly earlier than Christoph is. What a lot of teams lack is marketing and sales and distribution know-how, because they have a good product, we see that it's good, but then how do you bring it to the market? And that's a discipline. A lot of founding teams say, yeah, performance marketing, yeah, but that's not enough. So there we learned our lesson here. We paid money into companies and we lost it. Today, there's 3-4 disciplines which are sort of homogeneous distributed in a team. A good leader, doesn't have to be 3 good leaders, but a good leader with stamina, with charisma, with arrogance is always bad, but a certain element of self-consciousness helps. That's important for us. And maybe last anecdote, we had a company which fortunately we sold actually at a very good multiple, but in between that company ran out of money. And the investment team was shell-shocked. Because you're running out of money much faster than you think. An invoice comes in, another invoice comes in, and suddenly, oops, 4 weeks to go. What do I do? And that one team was really shell-shocked. They stopped working, they didn't know what to do, and we and the other investor and us, we helped them really come over that psychologically. But this is why if you're a founder, you have to live and work through the deep valley of we're running out of money, the wall is in front of us, how can I survive? And this we have to feel that the team can go through that valley, because in startup phase, people are enthusiastic, there's only, nothing is the limit, we make it. But that wall will come sooner or later, and it will come faster than you think. And then you see whether the team is good or not. And to us, so this video company where just the team was bad, I have to say we lost all the money. The other team, we helped pivot, so to say. They got money in, we bridged them, and then they eventually could work on, and that was a very good investment for us. So that's at least two elements of what I saw.
So questions to the other two, because we've had some sessions on how do I network, how do I approach. Are those things like passion and resilience and endurance, are those things that you can actually teach people, or does someone have to have it, and if they don't have it, then they shouldn't be founders? What's your experience? Can you train people?
I think entrepreneurial drive is something very hard to train. Mm-hmm. If you look at Harvard Business School, they have a huge faculty, and they teach for 2 decades the whole topic of entrepreneur. And if you see the greatest entrepreneurs coming out of Harvard, they all dropped out of school. And if you look for the guys who actually went out from that school, taking those kind of courses, there are no big names. So my feeling is rather, if you must have the energy, you must have from an early stage on the will to be independent, to build something for your own, to go forward, and then to do something. These are one type, and the second type I see are probably people who have worked 5 to 10 years somewhere, have a great idea, develop great energy to become independent, and then they start their own business, very successful. These are my 2 cases of success. Mm-hmm. And having said that, there are always exceptions that also exist.
What we do now, and of course we have the liberty of being able to work with teams that are a little bit farther down the road. What we do is really we do an assessment of that. So we don't do it in a way that we put them through an assessment center or something, but we assign in a team meeting 2 people to just that task to kind of see the dynamics in the team. And I think resilience is something that, yes, can come out of individuals, but it also can come out of a team. So for example, we use one of those color logics where you have like blue for analytical and you have green for kind of, that's always the guy who asks how the weekend was, and red is kind of the guy who is wants to be in charge, and yellow is kind of the guy who wears the Rolex and aspires to drive a Porsche. So if you have those 3 things, and you have a team which is just in one corner of the color scheme, so if it's only blue, very analytical, be careful. You want to have some of those other people definitely on the team. The green one will make sure that you will not forget about HR. The yellow one will not forget to be on a conference and sit on a couch, so that makes us yellow people here. And of course you need somebody to make a decision, because most decisions at the end are based on analytics. I mean, that's how I was brought up. But at the end, somebody needs to make the call. So usually if you have a CEO who's not red, it's going to be very difficult. So long story short, I think if you have a balanced portfolio there, I think you build resilience, because any of those colors will contribute very important things in the different stages of a company. If it's all hunky and glory and wonderful, I think it's easy. But when it gets difficult, like Markus mentioned, I think that's when such a team really, different people will take the lead at different times.
Talking of becoming difficult, Markus has already opened up with what his biggest mistake was, or one of them, the firm in Berlin, and all of these guys are here to learn from you. And so Max earlier called failure is productive learning. And so I would like to know, what was your biggest mistake? What is something where you say, I really screwed that one up?
I think the thing we always screw up, and we don't seem to learn from it, is, again, a point that Yossi, I think, was making, is that too much money is equally bad as having not enough money. So I think the biggest failures were all companies that were very well funded, at great valuations at the beginning, and then basically sought to spend that money because they had to, because they had basically promised a wonderful plan that was not doubling and tripling each year, but it was kind of 10-fold, 20-fold, 100-fold. They did that, and by that you build structures that actually consume too much money while you're still not sure what you're doing. And I think the critical concept is learn with as little money as possible how to do it, and then once you're in the scaling mode, get the big check. But I think getting the big check and figuring it out in 7 countries, a business that you have no clue about, I think is a very high likely of failure that you're inviting.
Stefan, how about you?
I think my biggest mistake I actually did in my business life was when I was CEO of Tomorrow Focus, and Christoph and I acquired Holiday Check, and Holiday Check was just exploding by growth. And instead of scaling that company and focusing only on taking out every competition in the travel section in Germany, we built a portfolio of companies, and we invested into many other sites, where our other investment, Zooplus, where we have been a very happy investor for a long time, the CEO there focused so long until there was no competition left, more or less, but Amazon. And today he has an absolutely great company. So my advice to you would be, great teams are usually very creative and think about a lot of things, but if you have something that scales, keep on that and focus to build it as long as possible and try to kill as many competitors.
Okay. By the way, we'll have the Slido tool as well, so if there are going to be questions, you can either put them through that system, or we'll be taking a couple of questions in a minute. So coming back to advice, if you had 3 pieces of advice that you can pass on to these young people in the room hungry for advice that will be all contacting you on Xing and LinkedIn and other ways getting your business cards. Markus, 3 pieces of advice, what would you say to young founders? How do you want to be approached? What kind of pitch gets you excited? What are do's and don'ts? And
well, I think normally I don't expect the classy 15-page PowerPoint presentation. It's always good to have it, but I always get excited by people, as I said before. So I want to hear the pitch from the horse's mouth. So be good in your pitch. Be focused and tell me what is it really that you think, the demand you can fulfill. Because a lot of people have a good idea for technology, but then you ask them, well, what's the product? And then it gets the thing. So tell me what's the problem you're going to solve. Technology is the second element, not the first one. So to the point, focused, clear. 15 charts is already a lot. I just want to understand in one chart what you do. Secondly, what is your team? If you come alone, that's a tough ride, I'd say. Might be a good idea, but you're not ready for a startup, I think. And thirdly, and this I think also comes forward, there's many more advices, but a lot of startups come and say, listen, we need 2 million and then we are funded. And I think that comes to what Christoph said and Yossi said. It's for 2 reasons not right. First reason, Yossi already discussed. If you have a lot of money, then you spend it, and then at the end you're running out of money. Second issue is your expectation, valuing your startup has to be very high in order to swallow 2 million, right? Because let's assume you get in 2 million, And if the company is worth 1 million, you already gave up 2/3 of their company. That's not happening, right? You should not do this. So you should very clearly think about what could be the value of the company and what is the money you can take in, not in order not to be dried out of that company. Because if you as a startup team at the end have 10%, and we've seen 2 cases where the team was diluted down to 10%, and 10% to me, I don't know what your experience is, then you see that startups and startup teams lose interest, because below 10%, you divide it by 3 or 4 people, that's getting pretty thin. So from the very beginning, think about valuation elements, and you would never get 2 million from us. The early stage fund we're gonna invest in you would never invest 2 million in one run. Secondly, I'm pretty sure when you come to us, early stage, probably different than Christoph, 2 million you cannot swallow. So be very clear on how much money do you need for step 1, why do you need that money, and how much can you swallow. So my second point, show me the team, and my first point, show me the problem, don't show me the technology. That's the second question.
I think in the early phases, and I think probably a lot of the companies present here in the audience are early stage. I think about who you take into your cap table first. I think having 10 business angels might be a little bit too much. So kind of concentrate on those people who really can help you from one stage to another. And don't really make it so much dependent on valuation and dilution. I think obviously the best way of doing it is a convertible at the beginning and kind of taking somebody along and kind of don't overpromise, but also make it possible to kind of then in your A round kind of that they're looped in at a certain discount to those A rounds, but they are not taking 50% of your capital. I think that was Markus' point as well, because the first rounds tend to be very often kind of a huge problem afterwards, and that's not easy to rectify afterwards. The second thing is if you want to talk to people like us, do your research. So if we get almost a spam mail, of course we're easy to research, so we are 13 people, so if you write 13 emails to Acton, be sure that you will not get an answer, because we talk. So the funny thing is that actually we have communication. So do your research and kind of who is, especially in larger firms like Index and Excel, probably even more so, think about who would be the partner who would drive that effort and who would be interested in what you have. So sending somebody a proposal to somebody who's only investing in the US and is only investing into fintech while you have an e-commerce business probably doesn't make that much sense. And the third one, I'd say, is if you then go to that meeting, try to build a relationship early on. I think it goes back to Markus' point. Being too arrogant and kind of always kind of keeping this as a negotiation, I think, is probably not a good thing. Why? Because VC is much more like dating than it is like a business. So at the end, I would love to see my entrepreneurs day and night because we like them, we love them. They might do good stuff, they might do bad stuff, but I think they're all people we like. And I think most of our entrepreneurs don't mind if we show up. And at the end, the first meeting, of course, is something that's like your first date. So don't be too over arrogant, don't be submissive, but try to be kind of a normal person and don't lose your humor. I mean, this is not all so serious. So crack a joke, make fun of people, that's all good. And if you've done your research, the earlier it is to make fun of us.
Okay, Stefan, what's your advice? Make fun of Burda?
That's a great idea. In addition to what the two gentlemen said, I would say first, if you see the successful founders, usually they have a very good education. There are always exceptions, but in general they have a good education. And put a lot of efforts to get a good education. Usually the people we see who are successful in business are not the top 5% of the academic results. but usually get a very good education first. And if you look for your first job, I mean, just have a look that you come to a company who's really cutting edge. Today in Germany, if you look at many startups, those people started working together with Oliver Samba. Many of the new startups are being founded successfully by people who came out of Rocket Internet. They learned a lot cutting edge on certain technology. So if you look for a company, go to a company that is really cutting edge. Number two, I think team take a lot of time. If you want to start your business, really look for the team quality. And I think we have said it a couple of times, team is for me today point number one. It's combined with what Yossi said, execution. You don't get strategy, you don't get execution done if the team is not working together. And I think Yossi's, I didn't talk with Yossi about it before, but a number of 3 is a good number for many founders we have seen who have been successful. 3, we're later stage. So for us, technology is very crucial. It might not be so important for new startups and for first round investments, but if you look for companies who have developed 5, 6, 7 years, they all go through a lot of technical problem. And actually every company has that. So Facebook, Google, they all had these kind of problems that they have been stuck for 6, 12, 18 months on the development. Today, investors are very careful about technology and everyone does a tech due diligence. If the technology is not running, you don't get an exit done. That's my feeling. Or you have decrease in valuation, which you don't want to have. So third would be for larger stage business, look that your technology is running, because without technology, you can't build products. Without products, you don't get customers, no revenue, you're dead. So technology has to run.
Okay, last question. In one sentence, I want you to do an elevator pitch to all these creative and ambitious people in the room. Why should someone come and want to work with you if he has a brilliant idea? Markus, in one sentence.
Because we have a lot of humor.
Okay, Christoph.
That was my answer.
Sorry, Christoph.
I think we help you balance risk and opportunity, and if you are in trouble, I think we stick with you.
I think we'll stick with you, or?
We'll stick with you. Didn't I say that?
Stefan, why should someone want to do business with Hubert Burda?
I love Burda because I think we try to play on world class what we do, and we have great and nice people that makes a lot of fun with to work. And these are the 2 reasons why you should join Burda.
Okay, wonderful. One looking at phone. Do we have time for questions from the audience?
More questions.
Okay, wonderful. First hand goes up, the gentleman.
Yeah, so you mentioned that currently there are no shortage in money, but there are shortage on the idea side. And also the same are saying the economists, for example, at the last conference at the European Central Bank. And that's my question, how do you respond to this? Do you invest in the idea that the ideas that wars that you would have invested 10 or 15 years ago? Or do you invest more money in other ideas? Or do you just stick to your normal investment style and let some money aside as cash?
So if I may reframe, what you're asking is, are we ready to lower our standards?
Yes.
No. So I think if we do that, I can't not talk for the industry, but I think if we do that, then I think what happens is what you will see ultimately, that the performance of the funds in 16, 17, and 18 will go down in the long run, because that's obviously what's going to happen. So whenever you have an over demand of not so great ideas or over demand of capital, I think you see 2 things. One is you see on the left side of the distribution, you see very high prices for very few assets. Then you see kind of it almost looks like that. And then in the middle, I think you see a normal distribution. And then on the right side, you see a lot of good money going after bad ideas. And that is something that for a VC, we cannot afford. So I think we will not lower our standards, and I think also that's why the number of investments right now is actually declining.
So that you will keep more cash.
We'll basically, we don't have the cash really, so basically most funds operate that they have commitments and then collect the cash. So what we do is basically we do not call those commitments and kind of spend less money. That's right.
Okay, we have the lady in the fourth row.
When is the right time to get an investment? Like, because you all, I think I understood that you all said that you don't invest in early stage. What is the perfect time to look for an investment as a founder?
Well, we do invest in early stage and startups. I think you should not come and see us when you only have charts and an idea. I think you should come and see us when you have something to show already. You probably, before you see us, you probably have either friends and family or an angel already who is giving you some money, whatever, 20,000, 50,000 K. When you have something to show, for us, pre-revenue is okay, pre-product is not okay. So we want to see at least the minimum viable product. We want to see the team. And in order to achieve that, you would have needed some money before, which is probably friends, family, or angels. But then you can come. We don't need revenues for now, but we have to see something. No idea in charts, tough one. We won't do.
Okay, we have one final question. I know there's a lot of interest in the room from the lady, but before we close, I think you're all approachable for questions if someone afterward. No. He may stick with you if things get tough, but you never know. Right, so the lady in the second row.
I was wondering, what do you think about startups doing their own ICOs? And what do you think is it doing to your business?
Okay, so initial coin offering, for those that don't know, you answer.
Well, I think when you look back, 2017, $2 billion were raised through ICOs in blockchain-based startups. Only 1 billion came through venture capitalists, so ICO by far outpaced VC. I see this pretty critical, not necessarily because it's taking the ideas away from us, but I see this critically because to me it is kind of a poor man's pre-IPO. It's not regulated. In this crazy world, you can always find someone who gives you money for a token. So it doesn't necessarily increase quality of the startup and of the idea. So as such, yes, it is something which you should think about, but not to the crazy extent which we see in the market today. Last answer to this, from 2014 to 2016, ICOs only made 300 million, 17, 2 billion. So something must have happened, which I think is not healthy.
I think, to me, ICOs are crowdfunding on steroids. So what it means is basically you think that there's a wisdom of the crowd, and there is no wisdom of the crowd. I'm sorry, there just isn't. Because that would mean that we would all be better off by just betting on enough things, and then it will come through. I mean, if you do that, then play the lottery. But I think ICOs are a circumvention to a large degree. I think public markets are for public markets. It's hard for me to understand that a fund like ours is heavily regulated and an ICO is not. Because it's much earlier, and basically people will get stung. As long as those are people who have too much money, I don't care. I think the only thing that taught me 2001, 2002, because I'm that old, is that I never want to get into a situation where a lot of people get really kind of betrayed by being lured into things that are actually is not in their risk appetite and shouldn't be in their risk appetite.
Okay.
If you do an ICO, talk privately to me. I invest in ICO.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. As I said, any questions you may have, please feel free to approach the gentleman here. Please give a big warm thank you to the two Stefan Wendt, Markus.